On the morning of August 6, 2005, the bustling port city of Fortaleza in northeastern Brazil woke up to what seemed like an ordinary weekend. While the city's residents went about their daily lives, one state bank was about to become the setting for an extraordinary event that would go down in history. No alarms had gone off, no shots had been fired, no traces had been left behind. Yet more than 160 million Brazilian reais in cash had silently vanished from the central bank's vault. At the time, that was equivalent to $70 million, and it weighed approximately 3.5 tons. It was the largest cash heist in Brazilian history, and arguably the world's. When authorities looked underground, they came face to face with one of the most brilliant crimes ever conceived. A narrow tunnel stretching dozens of meters, beginning behind a fake grass shop, and a robbery plan the likes of which you'd only expect to see in movies. But trust me, this one was planned just as cleverly as any Hollywood script, and it is, without question, one of the most extraordinary heists ever documented. This is the unbelievable story of how millions of dollars quietly evaporated from underground, without anyone knowing a thing. It all began months before the heist itself. The mastermind behind the plan was a man known by the alias Alemão, real name Jusivan Santos, but there was also the money man, Fernandinho, known in full as Fernando Ribeiro. He was the financier, the dark side of the operation. The robbery crew consisted of approximately 34 people, each with a specific role: construction workers, professional tunnel diggers, seasoned criminals, individuals with engineering knowledge, and, most critically, security guards, who leaked inside information from the bank itself. Some of them were veterans who had previously dug tunnels to escape from prison, or had been involved in similar crimes. For instance, one of the crew members, Moises Silva, had escaped from a São Paulo prison back in 2001 alongside 107 other inmates by digging a tunnel. When Alemão began searching for a strategic location near the bank, his objective was simple: find a point that would raise no suspicion, and from there dig a tunnel that would reach the vault floor of Brazil's central bank, the very symbol of the nation's financial security. The bank was renowned for its fortress-like defenses and kept enormous sums of cash in its underground vaults, making it an irresistible target for determined thieves. After weeks of reconnaissance, a modest house was rented on a quiet street close enough to the bank and far enough from prying eyes. But there was a problem. Excavating a tunnel of that scale would produce an enormous amount of dirt, and someone might get suspicious. The plan needed a cover story. The solution was as clever as it was simple. Set up a fake grass company. Grass is related to soil and earth, so trucks carrying sandbags out of the house would raise no eyebrows. The house was quickly painted green, and the business was given the name Grama Sintética, meaning synthetic grass. From the outside, it looked like a perfectly legitimate landscaping and gardening business. The man who set it up went by the alias Paulo Sergio, and here's an eerie detail. The date of birth on his fake ID was May 8th, 1968, the exact same date as the planned heist. The fact that his false identity's birthday matched the robbery date was a chilling little flourish, a sign that these criminals took pleasure in showing off their own cleverness. Sergio built excellent relationships with the neighbors, successfully deflecting any potential suspicion. They even had a van decorated with the company's logo, and fake invoices were issued to give the impression that real business was being conducted in the area. In short, the fake grass shop was far more than simple camouflage. Through this cover, they spent weeks observing the area, analyzing the underground infrastructure, and finally mapping out the precise route the tunnel would take. No one could have imagined that behind this ordinary-looking business, the most ambitious criminal project in Brazilian history was being meticulously constructed. The first shovel hit the earth in May. With all preparations in place, the crew began digging from the floor of the house, going approximately 4 meters deep before tunneling horizontally toward the central bank's vault. A 7-man team worked in continuous shifts using garden shovels. The man at the front would dig and push the soil aside. The man behind him would load it into a sack. Another would tie the sack closed and attach it to a rope, and a fourth would drag it toward the exit. The team outside would stack the bags, and the digging would continue around the clock, day and night, without rest. They were the living embodiment of digging with their bare hands. One of the biggest logistical challenges during excavation was quietly and inconspicuously disposing of the massive amounts of dirt being produced. Hundreds of truckloads of soil were dumped at a remote location outside the city, under the cover of fake landscaping jobs at night. To avoid suspicion, the vans were kept clean on the outside, and the soil inside was covered with tarps. This continued for some time, but hauling soil every single day started to seem a bit odd, so they began stockpiling it instead. When one room was full, they bricked up the wall and sealed it off. Then another room filled up, and they did the same. Eventually, when every room was full, they started dumping the soil into the backyard, and as a result, the garden floor rose by nearly 1 meter. This went on for months without a single neighbor or official growing suspicious. Tunneling naturally generates noise that could raise alarms. You might wonder how they managed to go undetected for so long. But the truth is, they simply weren't detected. To those around them, they looked like hard-working people running a small business, while beneath the earth they were advancing like a criminal machine. At one point during the dig, they encountered a sewage network. Rather than stopping, they slightly angled the tunnel's path and continued forward. By the time the tunnel was nearly complete, it was 80 meters long and 70 centimeters wide, just enough for one person to crawl or crouch through. Narrow but incredibly effective. In a tunnel of that length, oxygen levels drop rapidly, and carbon dioxide buildup can become dangerously high. The crew had anticipated this and installed a ventilation system along the full length of the tunnel. A fan at the entrance and pipes running through the tunnel to continuously pump in fresh air. The walls were reinforced with approximately 900 wooden panels to prevent soil collapse. There were also hose systems for carrying drinking water and battery-powered lamps for lighting, eliminating any risk of electrical failure. To avoid using phones and leaving electronic evidence, they used an intercom system, which maintained constant communication and allowed them to respond to any emergency that might arise underground. GPS and local maps were also used to ensure they didn't damage any underground infrastructure while digging beneath the streets. This wasn't just a tunnel, it was a full-on engineering marvel, more like an underground metro line than a criminal hideout. As the moment of the heist drew closer, the tension mounted. After exactly 3 months, on the evening of Friday, August 5th, 2005, the tunnel's far end reached directly beneath the central bank's underground vault, landing with millimeter precision. Thanks to weeks of meticulous calculations and measurements, you might be wondering, how did the robbers know exactly where the vault was located underground? The answer came primarily from 2 former bank security guards, Dusimar Queiroz and Edelson Vieira, both of whom had worked at the central bank and had been granted legal access to its sensitive areas. Information about the vault's location, the timing of security patrols, and how the alarm systems functioned formed the blueprint for the entire operation. This allowed the crew to aim the tunnel directly beneath the vault. And as mentioned earlier, the gang included people with engineering expertise, meaning this wasn't guesswork, it was science. The smallest deviation would have sent them off target, but it didn't. The robbers had deliberately chosen a weekend for the operation. This strategic timing was designed to minimize the risk of direct confrontation and maximize the available time window. The bank being closed, security guards being less vigilant, and the surrounding area being at its quietest, all of this created the ideal conditions for the operation to proceed without interruption. There was now just one obstacle left, the vault wall itself. The bank's vault was protected by a concrete wall reinforced with steel, roughly 1 meter thick. To break through this massive barrier, the crew used heavy-duty industrial equipment, specially designed drills, hydraulic jacks, iron cutters, and welding machines. This part of the operation was extremely dangerous because it generated a great deal of noise. But once again, the fact that the bank was closed meant there was no one around to notice the sounds or the vibrations. After 3 hours of grueling work, the wall was breached, and they made it inside. Inside the vault, a forklift used for moving money had, either by accident or by design, been left parked directly in front of a camera's line of sight during business hours. So when the crew emerged from the hole, the camera couldn't capture them. They then placed several pallets directly in front of the breach to ensure the cameras couldn't pick up the hole either. There was also another significant handicap for the security system. Of the 5 surveillance cameras in the vault room, not a single one was recording. They were operating only in real time, and they didn't even have a zoom function, making it virtually impossible to identify anyone's face. The 4-man crew moved carefully inside, staying close to the walls to avoid triggering the motion sensors, and made their way to the safes holding tens of millions in Brazilian reais. Freshly printed banknotes had their serial numbers recorded, which made them easy to trace, so the crew wouldn't touch those. Their target was old print 50 real notes that were either out of circulation or about to be withdrawn, notes for which the bank had not sorted or tracked serial numbers, making them nearly impossible to follow once they entered the economy. Team members then began swiftly and methodically removing the cash from the safes. Everyone had a role. Some pulled the money out, some counted it, others stuffed it into bags and prepared it for transport. The extraction of the money began at 22 a.m. on Friday night and was completed by 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. The amount they stole was staggering: 164 million Brazilian reais, approximately $70 million at the time, weighing a total of 3.5 tons. To put that in physical perspective, if you stacked all those banknotes on top of each other, the pile would stand 330 meters tall. It was, at the time, the largest cash robbery in Brazilian history, and in the world. A quick footnote: the bank was, of course, equipped with alarm systems, but those systems were focused primarily on the outer walls, conventional entry points like doors and windows, and interior motion sensors. The robbers were known to have spent a long time studying the bank's security layout and identifying its weak points. An attack coming from meters underground fell entirely within the blind spot of the existing sensors and alarms, and not a single one was triggered. The crew worked with icy calm, expertly exploiting this security gap. After 11 hours of intense work, the operation moved into its final phase, the escape. To move such an enormous load through the tunnel, a specially built rail system was used. The hours-long transport operation took place with military discipline along the tunnel's single lane, an incredibly grueling process given how narrow the passageway was. After 3 months of work, every crew member already knew what their cut would be. For the leaders and financiers, the share ranged from 10 to 20 million reais. For the workers, the ones who had actually dug the tunnel, it was around 2 million. Once the shares were divided, the crew loaded the cash into pre-arranged vehicles and company vans, scattered to various parts of the country, and simply evaporated into the darkness of the night. All that remained were 2 holes in the ground, and the shocking story of a robbery that was about to send shockwaves across Brazil. When bank employees arrived for work on Monday morning after the weekend, at first glance everything seemed normal. Doors intact, cameras on, security alarm silent. That is, until someone went down to the vault. The officers who descended couldn't believe their eyes. The doors were locked, but the vault was completely empty. Scattered across the floor were loose stacks of notes, single banknotes lying in a dirty environment, just sitting there. Leaving all that cash behind could be explained by the robbers' haste. The faster they got out, the lower their risk of being caught. And more importantly, they already had more than enough. The hole in the vault floor sent shockwaves through the staff. Police were called immediately and an investigation was launched. A vault, a hole, a tunnel. It was painfully obvious this was no ordinary robbery. Police officer Aeneas Soprera entered the tunnel, not knowing what dangers or persons he might encounter, and crawled through it for nearly an hour. When he could go no further, he climbed up and found the exit, and relayed the tunnel's starting point back to the others. When police arrived at the scene, it looked like they'd walked into a mining operation. Excavation equipment, work tools, gravel, tin cans, clothing, and hundreds of sandbags stacked to the ceiling. A white powder-like substance had been spread throughout the house. The crew had done this to destroy fingerprints. The team was so professional that after taking the money, they all disappeared simultaneously. Each had a pre-planned route. Some went to other cities, some fled abroad, others began laundering the money. Hotels, cars, luxury living, fake identities. Some vanished completely, but others made themselves far too conspicuous. You see, becoming a millionaire under these circumstances came with serious complications. One of them was that all your wealth was in 50 real notes. Paying cash for cheap items was no problem. But when prices got high, things got difficult. The very day after the crime, several crew members decided to buy 10 vehicles from a car dealership, paying roughly 1 million reais in 50 real banknotes. The purchased cars then had 6 million reais hidden inside their body panels and were shipped to São Paulo on a truck. The size of the purchase, paid entirely in cash on the spot, caught the attention of dealership staff, who reported it to police. Buying that many vehicles at once was simply too unusual. By paying in cash, they had shown they were unprepared for the escape phase, and they left a trail of clues behind them. Interestingly, while the group had run an extraordinarily sophisticated and disciplined operation during the crime itself, they acted with remarkable carelessness in the aftermath. And so, within the very first days, several of the robbers had already been caught, but the trail of the operation's ringleaders remained cold. As news of the heist leaked to the public, a massive wave of shock rippled across the entire country. It wasn't just the staggering amount of money stolen, the incredible engineering genius, the meticulous planning, and the masterful camouflage the criminals had displayed drew attention from around the world. Brazil's federal police then launched the largest manhunt in the country's history. The FBI even joined the investigation, out of concern that the heist could have international dimensions. Tracing the stolen money was complicated, especially because of the untraceable 50 real notes, which had been contaminated with dirt while being dragged through the tunnel. Nevertheless, by November 2005, authorities had managed to arrest 13 people directly involved in the heist. The purchased cars, documents tied to the rented house, and a single-use SIM card found by police while searching the property provided the first key leads. The serial number on that SIM card was used to determine which device it had been used in, and this led investigators to hundreds of hours of call recordings that helped track the crew. The conversations revealed how the gang had split up, how they were converting the stolen money into assets, and how they were financing various new criminal enterprises. What had initially appeared to be the perfect crime soon began unraveling into a cascade of blackmail, kidnapping, and murder. The stolen money became known as cursed money. One of the crew leaders, Fernandinho, was kidnapped by his own gang members shortly after the heist. Despite his family paying a large ransom, he was killed anyway. His body was found on the side of a highway near Fortaleza. The incident laid bare the deep mistrust, the greed, and the ruthless brutality that lurked within the gang. Meanwhile, the investigation pressed forward without pause, involving hundreds of agents. Most of those arrested were caught while trying to launder the stolen cash through luxury cars, real estate, contraband, and weapons trafficking. Another gang leader, Alemão, was eventually caught in 2008 after years on the run, while laundering money. He was convicted on charges including organized crime, use of false documents, and money laundering, and was sentenced to 49 years and 2 months in prison. But even behind bars, he never stopped scheming. Years later, in 2017, he was shot while attempting to escape from a prison in Fortaleza and spent 3 days in a hospital recovering. Investigations and money recovery efforts continued for years. In total, 129 people were arrested in connection with the heist. Adding up all the prison sentences handed down from the first trial onward, The total exceeded 2,452 years. Yet despite the massive investigation and the enormous number of arrests, only about 11% of the stolen money was ever recovered. Roughly 18 million reais, the vast majority simply disappeared and was never found. The central bank was forced to reprint the stolen banknotes. The fact that only 11% of the money was recovered demonstrates just how effective the robbers' strategy of targeting old, unmarked banknotes had been. It also revealed the serious problems that can arise for law enforcement when untraceable funds bleed into the economy, fueling a massive secondary wave of crime such as money laundering. The consequences went beyond just financial losses for the central bank. It fed illegal economies, distorted local markets, and potentially corrupted institutions through bribery. Some of the recovered money had been used to purchase luxury cars and real estate, and even to invest in contraband trafficking and arms smuggling. In short, millions of dollars melted away into the dark underworld of Brazil. Disturbingly, it also emerged that some police officers had collaborated with the robbers, accepting bribes in exchange for protection, once again exposing the capacity of criminal organizations to infiltrate state institutions and adding yet another layer of complexity to the case. This heist triggered serious questions about banking security worldwide. Banks were forced to comprehensively review their security protocols, especially against underground threats. Focusing only on surface-level defenses was no longer enough. More advanced sensors, tunnel detection systems, thermal cameras, and continuous monitoring of underground spaces all became new standards. The robbery also entered the Guinness World Records as the largest bank robbery of its time, cementing its place in the history of crime and bringing it international recognition. The audacity and masterful planning of the crime captured the public's imagination and transformed it into a modern legend. Remarkably, in the years that followed, dozens of tunnels targeting the vaults of financial institutions were discovered across Brazil and even Paraguay, a direct legacy of the Fortaleza heist. The Brazil Central Bank robbery is not just Brazil's, it is one of the world's most complex and brilliantly designed crimes, carried out without a single act of violence, with zero alarms and zero witnesses. This operation has been etched into memory not only for the sheer amount stolen, but for the mastery of tunnel engineering, the precision of its camouflage, and the iron operational discipline that made it all possible. It stands, without question, as one of the most audacious and sophisticated bank heists in history. So where did the 164 million go? Even today, the fate of those 3.5 tons of cash remains a mystery for many Brazilians. Perhaps one day, deep in Brazil's untouched forests or in some quiet coastal town, traces of that money will resurface. Or perhaps they will vanish forever, buried alongside the secrets of the men who took it.